welcome to my channel. This is Catherine, and if you are one of my old subscribers, I'm back. And this is still Jason. I will tell you why I haven't uploaded any videos for the past 1 year. And if you are my new audience, I think you know the reason why. So let's get into it. I think most of you guys are probably my new audience, so let me introduce myself. I'm Catherine, and this year I turned 29, and I'm very athletic, and I'm a foodie, and I like to make YouTube videos. I like running and cycling, and I like to cook and film mukbang and film vlogs. And I like to do bullet journal. I used to bike a lot, I used to run a lot, I used to eat with friends a lot. And this is how I used to look like, and I used to do all those things. And this is how I am now. You can see my hair is so much shorter, and it will grow. So this is what happened. Last year, on the same day I published this video, on July 4th, 2021, I was riding my bike with Jason in Prospect Park in Brooklyn, and I got into a really bad bike accident with a pedestrian, and that caused me traumatic brain injury. That's why I was gone for almost a year on YouTube. I'll just say whatever I remembered. That day was supposed to be a family barbecue later in the day, and so before the barbecue we wanted to get some workout done, burn those calories in order to eat more. And like we always do, like every week in the park, we will ride our bikes in Prospect Park, same route, same loops. And when I was going downhill in the park, if you know Prospect Park, you will probably know which area I'm talking about.
This is on the west side of the park.
So I was riding downhill. It was pretty fast, and out of nowhere, this pedestrian,
he was past the walk lane and walking without even looking, crossing through the boundaries of between the pedestrian lane and the bicycle lane.
And I think I was trying to avoid hitting him, so I broke really hard, and that caused my accident. I landed on the floor on my left face, and that caused me traumatic brain injury. And for those who you are watching, if you are a pedestrian, most of the time, please watch out for other people. And for cyclists out there, please be safe. And because I got injured that day, I didn't have any memory of that day, so I'll leave it to Jason to tell my story now.
So that morning, she and I went out in Prospect Park. This was probably roughly around 8:50 to around 8:30. We woke up a little late than we usually wanted to that day because of the July 4th barbecue that we wanted to have with our family. So it was like any ordinary day, just a special day where we're celebrating Independence Day. One thing to note when we went to the park is that we noticed there was a lot of people in that park, people setting up. It was a very good day. It was the temperature was perfect for barbecue, and it was a perfect occasion to go out to the barbecue. Where we entered was where we had the accident in the park, and we enter that part of the park every single time. That's our typical entrance and typical exit. The bike accident happened right after one loop. So right before we finished one loop, or actually exactly one loop, is where the accident occurred. I didn't see the accident. What I did was prior to the downhill portion of the park, I rode ahead because I told her that I needed to do my workout, and I said I'll see you after my workout, because she even planned on going back home earlier than me to prepare and get ready for the barbecue, and I was going to just spend my time in the park finishing my workout before I enter. So that was at that moment, I think 30 seconds as soon after my workout started, and I rode ahead. Next thing I heard was a large and very loud sound hitting the floor. I didn't think it was her. It didn't make sense it would be her, because she and I rode go in that park like any other day. We ride very safely. We also call out when we do see something dangerous, and we always try to watch out for these moments if they do occur. I can't say why it happened. I don't know. These things happen by accident sometimes, but from the report of those that saw and the police report, what happened was the pedestrian was on the side of that lane and decided to walk out into the bike lane without even checking. And at that moment, you don't have any time to react to it properly or any chance to dodge the incident. I remember I heard that loud noise and she fell on the ground. I didn't know it was her. I heard, and I slowed down near the downhill where I thought was safe, and I was waiting for her because I was like, that cannot be her, because this is like any other day. It can't be her. She's just going to she probably stopped waiting to see what would happen, making sure everyone was safe. But no, someone came down, rode down, actually saw me and told me that it was her. At that point in time, I took my bike, got off, and I ran up that hill. And next thing I noticed was that I saw her on the ground. There were 2 or 3 people surrounding her, holding her up, checking on her, making sure she was okay. But she wasn't okay. When I saw her, she was having trouble breathing already. She had blood coming out of her nose, her mouth, and her ears. She had a helmet on, I remember still. So it seemed very strange that, how that occurred. I saw another pedestrian on the ground, assuming it was definitely him that was on there trying to come about and trying to figure out what's going on. But he's unconscious. He was sitting about, but Catherine was laying on the ground almost flat, and someone was holding her head. Next thing I know, people were calling 911, people were pushing, crowding the crowds around the bicyclists that was using the road. And I know for sure it was very serious, because when I ran up there, I was very worried. And I was asking her, saying I was here, comforting her, saying, I'm here, babe, it's alright. But she did not respond. She didn't respond to anyone that was helping her. And so the people that were helping her, fortunately, were runners, and were also, I think 2 or 3 of them were doctors there, which is a coincidence that there were doctors there that were checking on her, making sure she was okay. And there was a paramedic that just stopped by. It was a cyclist too, just to see if she was okay. But she wasn't okay. She wasn't responding to anything. I think at that point we knew that she needed to go to the hospital as soon as possible. Stage 1, she had a major first surgery. That was the craniectomy, decompressive craniectomy. After that, she was in stage 2, which is coma stage, where she was there for a good amount of days, I think almost 3 weeks, where she was basically on anesthesia, kept not awake during that time, just to make sure they can mount her and allow her to heal during that critical stage. Stage 3, she woke up. The waking up stage was the most relieving stage, I think, for everyone, but also led to a very crazy part for her, and she doesn't remember any of it. Stage 4 was part of that consciousness and crazy stage as well, but that's the transition into sort of just being able to sort of speak to us a little bit, vocalize, and even write to us. We tried that as well, parents. Stage 4.5. This stage was one of the difficult stage in the journey, because this was a secondary injury from her primary injury, and this was the this was the CCF, the carotid cavernous fistula. Stage 5. She started remembering. After they treated the CCF, stage 6 was her stay at Rusk Rehabilitation. This was a very critical stage in her recovery, and we will talk a little bit more in details on how well she did. Stage 7 was her first discharge. That was the time when she left her first stint at Rusk Rehab, and we were very happy. Stage 7.5, so we had to go back to Maimonides for another procedure for her CCF, and it was something that, as a result of it over time, we also led into a condition that deteriorated her condition, which was the sunken head syndrome. Stage 8 was basically her angiogram / cranioplasty. Because her CCF, we had to delay her cranioplasty, and we'll talk in the details why we delayed it, because it was very critical that we sorted that out before doing that cranioplasty. But the cranioplasty was something that we definitely needed done.
It's like a miracle to me.
Yeah, it was a miracle. Stage 9 was, I think, also a miracle.
Oh yeah.
It was her second stay at Rusk Rehab, and we were so glad that she got another chance to go back there to improve even further. Because without it, I don't think she would be here right now, how well she's doing. And stage 10, basically discharging from the hospital, the Rusk Rehabilitation Hospital at NYU. That was also a happy moment because we knew that we were coming home, having gotten the care she needed and the work that she'd done.
And if you are specifically interested in any one of my stages, please see my description part in my video. I will put the timeline, and you can click the time where you're interested in watching.
Next day, I know 5 minutes, 10 minutes passed. I think EMTs came, the ambulance came. They knew it was serious as well. Next thing you know, they had to intubate her immediately. They brought her up. They brought a cast around her neck. She was still breathing and checking her pulse. They were saying the pulse is slowing down a little bit, so it seemed very worrisome, right? So they knew as soon as possible, as soon as she got inside the ambulance truck, they had to intubate her. So it was manually breathing for her because they couldn't rely on her consciously, to breathe on her own, because otherwise her life would have been at risk. It was a very serious situation. I was in the ambulance. I was crying. I was so worried because nothing in life prepares you for this incident. I feel very helpless. I couldn't figure out what I needed to do. I remember the first thing I did was call Uncle because he was in Brooklyn. I didn't call my sister because she was in Boston. I immediately called Uncle because he was expecting me to be at barbecue today. And
that day.
Yeah, and he wasn't so far from the park, and he knew that I needed to make this call because I know where hospital. They told him to go to the Maimonides hospital. I called him that day and I told him how serious it was and that we need to go to the hospital. I think at that point in time, I called my sister, called up my cousin, I called up Alex. I called up people that I knew would help, definitely, come and see what's going on, and I definitely called up. I had to find out to call your parents.
Oh, because my parents were in China. My whole family, they're in China.
The only family she had here was, I think, her college friends that really cared about her. So I called them as soon as possible. And I had to make sure that somehow we got in contact with your parents or somehow we got in contact with relatives, because it was something I knew was very serious. How serious it was, I just didn't know what was going to happen. I think next few days over the course it really revealed itself how bad it really was. You went into Maimonides hospital as a level 1 trauma. That's the worst you can get. And from there I'll talk about later from what transpired in the hospital. So the injury, as she explained, was a TBI, and this severity was a very severe TBI. The TBI affected primarily on her right side of the brain. She had a skull fracture here, but it seems as though when she landed here, the brain itself, I think, whiplashed and hit and was damaged on the other side. That's what it seems as to be initially. On top of that, later on we realized there was another major injury, which was a carotid cavernous fistula, or CCF for short, and that led to it was more like a stroke of some sort that was due to the trauma of the injury. I don't know exactly, the doctors, I don't think the doctors would necessarily know the full extent of how it might have triggered it, but they know for sure it's related to the traumatic brain injury. Her first surgery was happened the first day, within actually the first 2 hours. She was in the hospital. They scanned her immediately they did a CT scan just to see what kind of injury, what kind of swelling is. So she had massive brain bleed on the right side of her brain, and it wasn't getting any smaller. He performed a large decompressive craniectomy. When the brain swells, it has nowhere to go, and actually you can die from that if you don't give the room for the brain to swell out. And fortunately that they did it in a very timely manner. And I mean, on top of that, they removed a lot of the blood that was swelling and bleeding in her brain, so that removed additional blood. But that was just the first day that happened, and that was the most serious. I think that was the most serious surgery that she went through. That particular surgery was absolutely necessary and life-saving. And
thanks to Dr. Hooten. Thank you so much for saving my life.
So that first surgery happened. I just remember I just remember being in the waiting room for hours, because they did it. They think there was, like, reading from the report, like it was very serious, and they took their time with it, because just by the sheer amount of blood and swelling that was there. And the thing is this, after it's done the surgery, they just told me that said because of the extent of the swelling, they can't put the skull back. Right? Typically what they do is sometimes they tell us that they can do a decompressive craniectomy, relieve the pressure, remove the blood from there, right? Drain out the blood or whatever that's on there, and sometimes put it back. But given how swollen it was and such, very likely they couldn't do that. And they had to throw out her skull. Because typically what he wanted to do originally was to save the skull, the bone flap in her stomach. So when doing a decompressive craniectomy, your stomach can actually keep your skull flap alive. So what happens is that they keep it there, but in order for them to keep it there, there's requirements. The requirement is that you have to have enough fat, a certain type of fat that allows to store the bone flap, right? But because of the size of it, because she was so skinny, right, then she couldn't save it, so they had to throw out the bone flap. It would have been nice to keep it, just as a souvenir.
What souvenir? What are you talking about?
But they had to remove the bone flap. So we know in the future, definitely that it would be something we need to consider as another surgery. And at that point in time, it didn't seem like this was real. You read about these or hear about these sometimes, in many years I hear maybe 1 or 2 stories about this. But I never knew what happened to us personally, to her personally.
I never even knew about brain injury before.
Yeah. Brain injury is something, that's the reason why we're making this video.
Yeah.
Brain injury is not really much people are concerned about or talk about. And it doesn't get the attention I feel it should have, and I think it should, definitely. Stage 2, I think she was in the ICU in Maimonides, and we knew that she had to be kept there. We have a few stages we want to discuss about her TBI journey. So The next stage is stage 2. Stage 2 was a sort of like, I guess how we felt was a coma stage. This is not medically termed, you know, what stages these are, but I think the stages in our journey in our life. Stage 2 was the most difficult journey of all of them. Stage 1 was just pure trauma, just straight trauma, very immediate stress. Stage 2 was definitely just very much worry, a lot of worrisome, a lot of concern, because stage 2 was this part where we didn't know whether or not she'll make it through. And stage 2 was where I was just reading constantly medical papers about the probabilities, things about what happened and such like that, so I get an idea sort of what to expect and, you know, what to watch for as well. Because stage 2, when she was in coma, I was there in the hospital every single day, and I didn't leave. Maybe I left for a few hours, just for a 3-hour, 4-hour nap, get some food, come back, watch up, and that's it. But stage 2, first day, I think I didn't get a chance to speak to any intensivists or any doctors, and the residents were trying to keep track of everything was okay and just making sure, you know, she was kept alive. From what I understand, I was reading that time, was that this was the most vulnerable stage for her because her brain was still swollen. It wasn't done swollen. Like there were more pressure built up. There was a misalignment of how her brain was because of just the sheer amount of pressure from just from the trauma and the blood that was still in there, right? And the sort of the liquid, everything that was going on. Her whole body, her whole face was swollen up. Her whole body was swelling up. And her body was being flushed constantly with a hypotonic solution, just to help flush out, try to help flush out the water, or I guess the liquid in her brain. Like they want to constantly keep her in a state where they can prevent the swelling to expand even further. They use other types of solutions out there, like they didn't use some type of diuretic. I don't remember, I need to check my notes on that. But they were basically, she was strapped on IVs. She had propofol, she had various other types of, and I think later on you had antibiotics strapped to you. You had a lot of separate types of solutions and medicine flowing through you directly. They also had, she had to do an A-line. An A-line was basically, it's larger than a typical IV line, and that itself, I knew we needed to sign off on consent about doing this. And I remember, even for the first surgery, they were asking for her parents' consent or her family consent. And I remember that, how am I going to get this? And fortunately, we managed to get in contact with them. I think Harry was on the line, her cousin. You know, first 2 days of all these major things happening, we had to get consents to do it. But I think the doctors would have been like, we need to do this immediately for your decompressive brainectomy. So they did it anyway, regardless whether or not they got your parents signed off or not, because they needed to save her life. So that was stage 1. But stage 2, like we needed consent too for a few other things as well. And the coma stage was definitely rough because she was under a lot of just anesthesia just to keep her not awake. Because if it was to keep you awake, you would have definitely not responded well, and it would have been very difficult, painful. It's been very painful for her. I remember being even in the ER waiting to be prepped into surgery for her decompressive craniectomy. It wasn't pretty. Her arms was moving funny. She didn't respond. It seemed like she lost all types of consciousness. She was just moving weirdly. Her left side wasn't moving at all, only her right side. It was very, very difficult time, because at that point in time, I thought I lost her. It was, my uncle was in my room, was in the ER with me that day, and he and I were holding her hand. He and I were holding her hand just to keep her down, and just to. But I know she wasn't conscious. She probably didn't know what was going on at that time. I think her body was just moving because of just the brain trauma, the amount of brain damage that was going on. It was not purposeful at all. That was the hardest thing to watch her in the ER at that time. But being in a coma for her was a little bit more soothing and calming for her. She didn't know what was going on. I think she was in pretty much a very, very, very deep sleep. The amount of different types of anesthesia she was on and the different types of IV she was on, it was very intensive. And I was being there every single hour watching her blood pressure, her heart rate, her breathing rate, her pulse, even her, especially her temperature. Because of her brain injury, she had that much swelling. Her body regulation wasn't doing so well, so she was spiking a very high fever. And they had to put a special mechanical sort of cooling blanket that circulates water over this mat, so it basically pulls heat from her body. Otherwise, the heat would just constantly, like if she gets to a certain temperature, it would have been more damaging towards her brain and body if they didn't keep that temperature down. So the purpose of the coma stage was pretty much to prevent any secondary injury. And as the brain swelled, you wanted to hopefully not allow it to swell even more. And I think the worst was during the 3rd and 4th or 5th days. That's like the peak swelling. That's when we had to watch very, very carefully. And they were very careful on how to remove and managing the anesthesia amount on you. Because by doing so, it allows them to not put you too deep a state or hurt you in any way. Because anesthesia, being on it for that long is not a good thing. It definitely can lead to other disruption in your body. And it takes a very long time to flush out and normalize over time. So during her coma stage, there was a few things that happened. I think there was a lot of massive swelling. There's a lot of things to do. She was constantly going down for CTs just to check on her progress and see where the brain was evolving. And it didn't look good going into the 4th day, but then I was sort of expected. And we had a very good neurointensivist, Dr. Levin, that was managing her for definitely the first many 2 weeks. And Dr. King was also another intensivist that worked with her that was managing her case very intensively. And those are things all the residents that were working in the ICU at that time, they were on top of a lot of the care for her. And you know, the nurses did a wonderful job in ICU, very knowledgeable in helping making sure that her IVs were there, watching for any issues, anything that might come up, and reporting it as soon as possible, because she was definitely in a very critical condition. I think we didn't really feel much relief, or in some sorts that, you know, hopefully nothing too concerning about whether or not you make it or not. Was I think by the 2nd week, I think we knew that you were stabilizing. Your swelling started coming down slightly, and we knew that we were sort of past the worst part of the stage.
So, how many days did it take for you to wake up?
So I think it was, I need to check my notes on this. I think it was probably by day 6, 17 that they decided to decrease the fentanyl and the propofol, which are very well-known anesthesia type of drugs, to an amount that she can wake up from. And there were moments that she woke up. I know, you know, our friends bought a balloon. I remember one friend, Lanson, brought in a balloon. I know it was like get well soon. And she woke up that morning. It was, I think 8 or 9. I think when they sort of paused the fentanyl and propofol, that I saw her open her left eye. And from that moment, I knew that she started waking up. And then I think the next day was when you woke up again, and I saw her tracing the balloon. And because there was an air sort of venting up there and it was moving the balloon, she was tracing it. And at the same time, I remember Dr. Hooten came in, her surgeon came in to check on her, and he was surprised to see her wake up as well. I think he's a little bit more cautious about these things. He didn't probably take it as if it was an indication of anything, but it was definitely good to see that she woke up. Her right eye didn't open because it was very swollen, and that was something we'll discuss later about why it was so swollen.
I might put a picture here.
You might. She might, but it's not very good. It's not very good. Her eyes was swollen. Both her eyes were really swollen during the time of the injury, but it was only her right eye that didn't swell down. Her left eye swelled down, and we were okay with it. But her right eye just kept going and going, and we didn't know what it was. I mean, I'm not a doctor. Neither were any of our friends or some of the nurses. I even asked some of the nurses, like, "Have you seen this before?" Saying, some of them were like, they didn't want to answer. Some of them were like, "Never seen this before." Some of the doctors didn't really know what it was. Intensivists didn't know too much of it because I probably don't see this often. And what she did is very rare. I read in papers, some trauma cases you see this 1 or 2% of the cases. So to see a trauma like this and then see that, it doesn't come immediately to mind. And a lot of it was a lot of swelling. Like you had a lot of liquid, a lot of blood is still in your nasal chambers or whatever it was inside that area of your head. Like your head is very complex. I think there was a lot of swelling that's still going on. So I think no one wanted to conclude anything because they didn't know exactly what might have been the cause. But the swelling of just being flushed with so much hypotonic solutions and so much IV, just like they can't say exactly what it was at that time. When she woke up, this is where we're going to discuss about stage 3 now. So stage 3, she woke up. It's a little bit also very troublesome at that time because that's when she started moving her arms a little bit, but the movements were not purposeful, not like that. It was a combination of a lot of things. A combination of just purely posturing. And the intensivist saying typically is a sign of very, very large brain damage. And it doesn't mean that she can get better or recover from it. And it's typically an indication that she's probably worse. She's in a very bad situation. I was very, very scared, very, very traumatized. Because seeing that made me very worried, maybe very concerned about her well-being, whether or not she will get through this at all. But I think there was a lot of patience and time to see how things were kept through. And you were still underneath a lot of IVs, and she was still posturing. But over some time, I think before her parents came, her posturing stopped for her right side. And it was a good thing. There was some times where she was lifting her arm and she was trying to purposely try to move it, and it was good because doctor was saying that if you can move against gravity, is an indication that you're not posturing, that you're purposely moving against it, because you're trying to move your hands up a lot. You were doing this. She was doing this a lot, moving her hands up against gravity while laying in bed. So the intensivists were pretty much saying, this is a sign that she's in purposeful movement, even though it's not how we define as full purpose. Like what we think purpose, like we're trying to grab a cup or do these things. She's purposely moving herself as opposed to just.
But I was moving my right side.
But not your left.
Yeah, but my left brain wasn't really damaged.
Yeah, her left brain wasn't as damaged. It was pretty much, for all intents and purposes, it was intact. Compared to her right side of her brain. So that's the reason why her right hand was moving, because her left brain was not damaged to the extent the right side of the brain was damaged. And her left side didn't move for a long time. I just remember trying to massage it, trying to stimulate it and such. But it was pretty much only her right side that was moving. It was sort of expected given how swollen her brain was on the right side. But when her right side started moving was a very good sign that the swelling was going down and that her brain was allowed to sort of move and allowed to come back to some state that allowed her to give her purposeful movement. And she didn't say anything at that time. Her left eye movement wasn't very strong either, but her left her left thigh was moving a little bit more, and her right side was moving. Her right leg wasn't moving at all. I remember, it was just her right arm, which was I still thought was progress, good progress. And then it came to the point where most of the time she wasn't posturing. She was moving her right arm, purposely moving her right arm. And I know we had a chance, because for her to purposely move her right arm like that, it meant that I think that she had some consciousness there and she knew what was going on. But I don't think she was trying to remember anything. It was just, she was still in a very bad state. Over the next few, I think her parents eventually came, and both her parents and I took turns watching out for her, which gave me relief because I was definitely on my physical limits, pretty much staying up all night, watching her and making sure everything's okay. Because at one point when she did wake up over, she was actually trying to scratch her head, the right side of her head where there was no bone there. It was just a skin. It was just a sculpt of her skin. And I had to prevent that. You constantly need to watch her, hold on to her, and you couldn't let her. At the same time, there's a note on her bed: don't let her sleep on the right side because there's no bone there. So imagine her not knowing that she has no bone there. Probably don't even have any type of idea of reason at all. Just like wanted to scratch it, wanted to deal with something here, and just constantly seems like it's self-harm, but she probably didn't realize it was self-harm. And that was
probably it was itchy.
It was itchy. Most likely it was itchy because she had, think about her skull was cut, it was very itchy. She wanted to probably scratch it. She was trying to scratch it, definitely for sure. And I think she couldn't. And actually there's a few things that actually happened as well too. I think before you woke up, they had to give you a trach.
That's why I have a scar here.
Yeah, she has a scar there now. And so she was trached, and they had her on a breathing machine. It was a very sophisticated. These breathing machines are so sophisticated. They were breathing for her for a while. And at one point they switched that mode to assist her in her natural breathing, where they caught her trying to get a breath and they put more pressure in it to get, and they can set the concentration of oxygen in there. So she was pretty much at 100% oxygen all the time, right? And I didn't know these devices existed. I was very impressed. I don't think she would be alive without it. The other thing that she had to do was that she also had to get a peg. So
I want to show my peg scar.
You want to show it?
I have a peg. You see it?
Yeah, that dot right there.
Yeah. So I have 2 belly buttons.
Yeah. So she had a peg done too, because they had 2 pipes going through her mouth, and she started chewing on it when she woke up. And it was not safe for her to keep chewing on it. She had the trach first. That was more important to have. The peg they did later, but the peg was, I think, the peg they did it without. They had to sign something out. I don't remember being there. I think your parents was there. They did it immediately. But these are very standard procedures they do for patients when they're in conditions like she was in. And they trached her, they pegged her, and it was very traumatizing to see her with that pipe in her neck and through her stomach. But reading about it, knowing what the doctors were informing me about it, it was the best choice to do, because having it through her mouth would have damaged her vocals and damaged in the long term. So it was definitely the better option to do. So, but it didn't. It definitely was crazy because she would be pulling it all the time, the trach tube, and she did not sleep at all, because this is part of stage 4 I was discussing about, right? So stage 4, her consciousness, this consciousness of her was crazy. She pulling on her peg, trying to scratch her head. Her mom took the night shift, and she had no choice because in the hospital their policy was that you can't, like we mentioned, we had to share a room. We were outside we were eventually moved down from the ICU when her parents came, because she was no longer critical. I wasn't happy about it, not being in ICU, but I was also glad that we're in ICU because being in ICU means you're worse off than you are. Being moved down from ICU, being stepped down, pushed down from ICU means that you're improving, you're doing better. But to me, I wish we had the same care in the ICU and level of care but it makes sense why ICU has that type of intentiveness. But when she was moved down, her mom did not sleep. She shared a room with another patient that was female, so they could not allow another man to stay overnight. Fair. Her mom had the worst shift. Her mom had to hold her down at night. We had to hold her down. It was the most difficult time for her mom. She didn't get any sleep. Because her dad and I took the day shift because that was the only shift we had, but we took it as long as we could. We sometimes overextended our visiting hours for the day shift to make sure that her mom was well rested and ate. It was a very difficult time for both her parents and I because we could not leave her alone. At any point we slacked off, she did hurt herself here and there. And one of the more important things was her eye. Her eye was still very, very swollen. And she was scratching, the eye was bleeding. And if a moment let go or a moment didn't know what was going on, it would have been detrimental to her health. Fortunately, we were pretty much on top of it for, I think, a good 2 weeks while we were there. And trust me, I just seemed like it was like working a job where the most difficult job in the world. I felt really bad for her mom. I really did. Because her mom wanted her to sleep. There were some moments that she did sleep. But I think those moments were just from pure tiredness. I remember one time, she just stopped moving because she was just so tired from fighting us. Captain was just exhausted every bit of energy she had. And she just gave up and took a 2-hour, 3-hour nap. And her mom texted me saying that's the most she slept in a while. But she exhausted herself. But once she exhausted and got up and took her mini nap, she got back up, she was on it again. But this is sort of to 4.5. The reason why she couldn't sleep was when we realized that after trachea pegging her, she sort of was able to lip some things. We figured out something. She was she's just saying she was in a lot of pain. It was an enormous amount of pain, and that pain was from her eye. And she was stable enough to go to Rusk. So so her eye issue didn't really become noticeable until we went to Rusk the first time, which is the rehab hospital. When she went to Rusk for the first time, the rehab hospital, I think the doctors there were very concerned about that right eye, and they wanted to definitely have someone to take a closer look. Maimonides did take a closer look at it, and I'll explain why they probably didn't catch it. They had an ophthalmologist observe your eye pressure for the many days of Maimonides just to track it. You were in the high range of 20 to about 25, 26, sort of.
What is the normal range?
Normal range is typically between 12 and 21. You don't want to, I think that's what it is. You don't want to be above 21, but even 21 is considered high, the normal range. So somewhere between 12, 11, or between 15 is very, very normal. She was 25. It was very obviously seen that there was a lot of pressure and swelling because of just how bulging her eye was coming out. Yeah. You can look up yourself online and you will see some bad pictures. Just imagine some of the worst pictures you see. She was one of the worst ones out there. It's like I've seen pictures online. She has definitely the worst one out there. But I think the ophthalmologist at NYU came over to consult with the rehab doctors at NYU. I think by the second day, they did a CTA. A CTA is just an imaging thing to map out her arteries, and they did a CTA of her head, trying to map out the arteries and the veins of her head. And from the note of the imaging, it appeared that she had a CCF, so a carotid cavernous fistula. I was reading that report on a train. I didn't know what it was. I was just telling your parents there's nothing to worry about. Next thing you do, we come home from the hospital. We felt relieved because she's there now. She's gonna get better. Next thing you know, after we eat dinner, I get a call from the resident at Rusk saying that she needs to go back to Maimonides to get this treated as soon as possible. It was also a very, very stressful time because I told her parents on the train that it was nothing to worry about. I just jinxed myself. So when I told her parents about this, her parents were also very worried. And we had to drive all the way out to NYU to grab her stuff. Well, not grab it, the ambulance grabbed it for us and everything like that. Put it back, but we had to drive to Maimonides Hospital by like 12 a.m. at night, 1 a.m. And we had to stay overnight, we had to, because the next day we met with Dr. Wong and at Maimonides, and Dr. Wong said they needed to treat it, and this is what they're gonna do. Basically, a CCF, the one that she had was a direct high flow, meaning is very, very bad. High flow means it's a lot of bleeding. I think a lot of shunting, where it was like I was very plainly saying, just a lot of bleeding there, and that bleeding was bleeding into her eyes, hence the amount of blood and swollenness that was coming out. That was explaining that situation. And it's a very tricky spot to treat too. And I didn't know what kind of treatment that's possible. I thought surgery was needed to treat it, but apparently the treatment was an angioplasty. Angioplasty is basically what they do is they stick a type of cable through your main arteries, either through from your inner thigh or from your arms, depending on, I guess, when I was explaining through what kind of entry points or where you treat, what the area of your body you're treating from. And they stick coils, or they stick like a graphing or a stent, they call it a stent, or other types of materials in there to sort of block off these bleedings or to fix up the arteries, like as a frame to fix up the arteries. So imagine a burst pipe. How do you fix a burst pipe sometimes? You can patch over it, but you can't really patch over it because otherwise you have to cut into it. So, but you're going into the pipe. So what they did is like they put a frame inside the pipe, your arteries. And so the intention of that is that over time, the frame acts as a structure for your body to heal, like the arteries to heal back. So what happened was that she was bleeding in the area, the cavernous area. So it's a very complex, bony area. So imagine trying to stick a cable through there, and they were doing they were going through imaging at the same time. Like they were going constant type of X-rays. These are special types of X-rays, or well, not X-rays, but some type of very special machines that scans her head constantly to see how they're navigating through her head and see how the blood is flowing. But it took a very long time. Like I thought when I was reading this, it's gonna take 3 hours, 2 hours, right? That's typical. It took 7 hours. It took 7 hours. Even Dr. Wang and Dr. Busek, which was the other
two surgeons that worked on my case.
Two surgeons. These are two neurologists, two special surgeons, and cardiovascular surgeons that deals in this type of procedures. They seemed exhausted when they got out of that room. When they came out, they were not also sure because it was really bad. Like it was very bad. And the reason why they didn't catch it the first time because I think when they were trying to do an MRA scan on there, it wasn't obvious what kind of injury it was. I think it evolved over time. Because when she was discharged from Maimonides, from discharge back to Maimonides from NYU Rusk, her pressure was 45. Yeah. Think about it, your normal range between 11 and 21. Hers was 45. And we thought, at that point we were so scared for you because we thought you lost your vision on that right eye. We thought you lost your vision that day. And fortunately they treated it. And then she had another 9 days after being treated in Maimonides to get arrested. Those other days were difficult. But one thing to note though, I think when you were there is that there was other issues that came up, and you were still being crazy, right? But I think you were more calm. Some days you were a little bit more calm. She was resting. She was back in the ICU, and so they were trying to manage her properly, trying to make sure that that whatever they did was helping. It was helping for sure. I think the first 2 days, it seemed like the swelling has went down a little bit, and then it stabilized and go down further. So it seemed though the coiling they did and the stenting they did was helping, but we knew it wasn't, and we were told definitely wasn't going to be the only time to go back to do this procedure again. But it was definitely there to help treat it in the meantime, to see, because it was a very dissected artery there. It was just really bad up there.
And now,
and that was a reason for probably also a very reason for a stroke and a bit of her brain damage there too, probably.
no. Now my eyes are so much better. I think almost back to normal, because I had to do 2 or...
She had to do a second one eventually, but the second one wasn't as traumatic as the first one. But after she was treated for 9 days, I think my biggest worry was that we couldn't go back to NYU Rusk to get better, to do your rehab, inpatient. But after 9 days, she went back to Rusk because they deemed her to be sort of safe enough to go back. But I think it was very scary because she was crazy. Her blood pressure was enormously high, very, very high after the surgery, and they had to keep it very pretty much in a certain range, just that it didn't get any worse. But overall, her blood pressure the entire time since the injury, up until the second time she went back to Rusk, was not her normal range. It was very high. It was all over the place. Some days high, some days low. Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah, you don't remember this because she didn't watch her blood pressure. But when she went back to Rusk, her blood pressure was back. She was actually a little bit lower than her normal range, but she tended to have low blood pressure. But I think when your blood pressure went lower, you seem like a sensible, reasonable person. I think the last day when the Maimonides going back, I think was a day that we felt a little bit more relief on not having to watch or hold you down.
So it's not crazy.
Yeah, because she wasn't as crazy, but she still had that itch to have, but she didn't do it as often. She was actually trying to talk to us, because over time the trach was downgraded to a smaller size, so that enough air was able to travel to her vocal cords and speak to us. I think the moments that she was able to speak to us was pretty much very happy moments, because we haven't heard her voice or say anything for almost more than a month, and it was one of the happiest moments of that time, and we were very relieved that we can talk to her, because we were trying to see if you can write to us. We were happy the first time we gave a notebook, you could write, you scribble something, and we managed to figure out what she was scribbling. And we were very happy because she was scribbling "I love you."
Oh, that's so sweet.
She was lipping sometimes "I love you" too, and like
to you only, right?
to me, to Darling,
Darling's her bestie.
yeah, her parents too. And at that point, we knew that you recognized us even with your one bad eye. You can still see us. But at the same time, I remember right before we discharged to NYU Rusk, I think your dad tested your right eye. Like he opened the lid a little bit. I'll bring it up a little.
Bring
up the lid. Yeah,
right?
bring her lid a little bit, and put fingers in front of her eye, and she was able to tell. So the fact that she consciously knew how many fingers and she could use her right eye, that was amazing. And so that was her stage 5 of remembering things. Like as soon as she was calm, she went back to my Rusk, she started remembering. That was her stage 5.
Oh yeah, that's my whole memory where it started.
Yeah. So literally from July 4th until August 13th, she has no memory of no idea what's going on. I think you remember who was in that ambulance with you the second time going back to Rusk.
Oh, second time is Rong 姐姐, and she tricked me that. She tricked me that I could drink water, because back then I had a trick. Then I couldn't drink or eat anything. And she said, Xiaoya, Catherine, you can drink water when we get to Rusk. And then when we got there, guess what? I can't.
We had to feed her ice cubes, but we couldn't really feed her. We were not feeding her purposely. We had to we wet her lips with it, She was getting water from the peg, but she doesn't know this.
It doesn't feel the same, okay?
No, it doesn't feel the same.
No,
it doesn't.
And I used to drink tons of water.
Yeah.
I love water.
So in her stage 5 remembering, it was like, I think it was a happier moment.
And I think that's because I fixed my CCF.
It's fixed her CCF because she got more blood flow back into her brain, that side. That probably allowed her to probably overall do better in memory and everything like that. Because imagine no blood going, well, there's no blood, there was blood going, but it was seeping through in the wrong areas, not enough blood going there. Imagine what that happens, right? You're not going to get the proper perfusion, proper oxygenation, and possibly some brain death too associated with it. So fortunately we caught it hopefully early enough. I don't want to say things in hindsight, but definitely not worth it to say in hindsight, but good thing we had it treated. And of course, stage 6 was her first rehab, her actual first rehab now that she was treated, right? And I think this was definitely the happier part of our journey. Tough, but not as tough as that first 45 days in Maimonides. That was the hardest moments of my life. I think of your parents' life as well too.
My life too, even though I don't remember.
I think the first time rehab was probably very difficult for you. I think we could talk a lot more about that. So stage 6, this is actually a very big area that we want to discuss about. Stage 6 was essentially the importance of having inpatient rehab, and even getting to an inpatient rehab I think was one of the most difficult part, because if she didn't have the support from me and from my friends, especially I think very critically her friends that helped us on this as well, and my friends, I don't think we would be in a good rehab, especially not at NYU Rusk. The process of getting in there for a patient that doesn't have any idea what the hell is going on, like with a type of brain injury, you can't. How do you make a decision like that? You need family, you need friends, you need support system, and I think I feel really bad for individuals that come in the hospital, probably got in a car accident, doesn't know who the families are. Maybe you have an ID made on a phone, maybe someone's contacted, but sometimes it's difficult, right? But imagine you're a pedestrian, you don't have your wallet on you, you don't have an identification, and you got in an accident, right? And you had a brain injury, and how would you even know where to go, what to do? And I feel we can do better as this, but I don't want to talk too much about that right now. We won't probably discuss about that process. But overall, I think the overall help with her friends, with my submission to the application, especially with the social worker that worked with us, Maimonides, we got into NYU Rusk. And this was before her CCF treatment, right? I think it was when the first time she got discharged there. But I was very, very happy that you got in. I remember breaking down and crying when you got in, because I know getting there was very important, because it was basically critical for you to get better. I know the importance of it, reading about rehab, and that if it wasn't there and was going to some other facility where you might get mistreated, might be mistaken, I didn't seem like you're in a position to do anything. It would have been much more difficult for you. But I think identifying patients that do need this type of care should go there immediately and get it. Whether, like, some people just say you shouldn't go there because how do you know you can get better or not, right? But anyway, I don't want to talk too much about the politics of that, but I'm very thankful she got there. And being there, it was work immediately for her. She got there, I think, on the weekend, next day, Monday. Wasn't on Monday, was it? Yeah, I think it was like a weekend you got there or something like that. Or next day, she heard her therapist that she had the first time there came back and worked with her. And these 3 main therapists that worked with her were wonderful.
They're wonderful, and this is a picture of me getting discharged, the second discharge. That's a selfie I took with all my favorite therapists. Julia, Jan, Diana, all of them here.
Yeah. I think having early therapy, despite how you were, was critical. Like they didn't give up on you. they knew immediately what they needed to do to work with you and get you better. I just remember even the first time you were in bed, you could barely move or shuffle yourself in bed. Like you always needed a technician or a nurse to help move you and change you still. But if it wasn't for like, I didn't know how well you would get if it wasn't for their work with you. And it was just crazy. You went from not being on the move in bed or even turn your head to just getting off the bed, standing up, and you know, we'll hear helping here and there with devices, but it was definitely seemed like a miracle for how well she did. And her physical therapist was very essential to helping her walk again. It was crazy how she transitioned from these fancy supportive devices to be able to just put on her brace, get up from the bed, and sort of walk with a cane. It was crazy. Like, it just unimaginable. I didn't know what happened. And from the occupational side to working with your hands, getting back. Because when we went to, second time we went to Rusk, her left hand still didn't move. Her left leg still didn't move. Nothing moved on that side.
And now look.
Yeah, and now, like, it was the first time she was there. By the time she came out, she was able to move. She was able to move her fingers. She was able to move her legs, even though she still wore a brace. But at that time, it was just like the fact that she can stand meant that she had potential to get even better, and that's why I had very high hopes for her.
And if you have any questions you want to ask me and Jason, please give us a comment below. And if we receive enough comments, if I have like the comments I have that has most thumbs up, I will select them to my Q&A session maybe in the future.
Yeah. So I think this type of success you had the first time gave a lot of hope to, I think, everyone, to your parents, to me, to your friends, your family, and everyone. I just wish we could stay there even longer, but the thing about inpatient hospital is it's expensive. Yeah. And I wish there was something in between that, because our next stage was discharge, which is stage 7. Discharge was a little bit difficult, I think, but I think I was trying to mentally prepare for it, and especially you for mentally prepare for it, because for the last 2.5 months, she was in the hospital system in New York, right? And everything was sort of taken care of for her, from the nurses checking on, you know, her trach, her peg, her feeding, her medications, from scheduling all done by the hospital staff, doctors checking on her, making sure she's looking okay, you know, nothing serious, nothing coming up, to even just you know, the person that created your pink brace, they were checking on you when you got it and everything like that. But now you're home. And well, one thing, when you got discharged, she got discharged without the need for a peg and a trach. We got those 2 removed while at NYU Rusk, and I think that was one of the great milestones
of me.
Of her recovery.
Yeah.
Because imagine managing a trach at home or managing a peg at home. I just think that would have been very difficult for both of us, because we would have to constantly have a nurse sometimes check out and see things, and especially if we were to manage it freshly at home, and the risk of other complications that might be associated with it. So we're very glad that, being her stay in rehab, she was strong enough to get off the trach and strong enough to get off the peg as well too. But she worked hard for it. She worked hard to get off of it.
To get off the peg, I had to eat. Being able to eat enough food every day so that I don't need a peg. And I was working so hard, and every day I eat. I'm like, is this enough? Is this enough?
It was
Did
a chore
I eat
for
enough?
her. I think the first meal she had after removing the trach, because she couldn't eat liquid food if she had the pipe in her. So after removing the trach off, which we're very glad that she was able to do, she was breathing on her own. She was breathing strongly on her own. She was able to start eating, and when she started eating,
I got tired from chewing.
Got tired from chewing. You haven't chewed for over 7 months, almost 2 months, 7 weeks, you lose all that muscle. Yeah, and she had paralysis on her face too at that time, so her left side wasn't doing work at all. The reason why she had paralysis on the left side because when she landed and she fractured the side, there's a lot of swellingness that happened on that left side of the face, and that swellingness led her to lose facial movement on her left side. That weakness, and it was very traumatizing because just imagine all the injuries. You already have a main brain injury, not exposed, but like no brain bone flap. You have a CCF you gotta deal with. You have hemiplegia, you can't even move your left side, and now you have a facial paralysis. I was just like, this injury was definitely a very difficult injury to manage. And there's so many things to keep track of, and I think sometimes I got annoyed. At one point I think I got annoyed when something new came up, just like why? I think it was just...
And I had to wear a helmet every time I'm not on my bed.
Oh yeah, speaking of that, she had to wear a helmet. Yeah, and it was a funny helmet. It wasn't fitted well. Yeah, there was so many things needed to do. But anyway, discharge home was definitely a milestone because she hadn't been home for almost 2 months, over 2 months. Yeah, almost 3 months. July 4th to September 13th. And that was also the most scariest part because she was in a wheelchair coming home. Even though she can walk, it said she could walk, she was barely able to walk. It wasn't very strong walking, but it was able to walk. She had to be in a wheelchair, and I didn't know how to deal with a wheelchair back at home. But the thing is though, right before discharge, they just don't say, hey, this is her, just take it, go home. NYU Rusk did train us, train her mom, train me, back at home how to deal with these things, and definitely the PT and OT were very essential. Julia and Diana were very essential in educating us and teaching us and what kind of equipment we need and how to manage things, what to watch out for at home, and any type of emergencies as well too. And it was amazing that they were able to provide that type of help, because once we're home, we knew we had to play by ear. Like we needed to know how to figure out what we needed to do once we're home, like make adjustment here. But the fact that we had a better training and idea of what needs to be done, it was very smooth to come home. But worrisome too, because we didn't know how it would be. I think as soon as I got home, I think the most difficult part was getting her medicine. And it was like, I think one of the social workers at NYU sent it to a pharmacy a place we used to live. So during her injury, I at least ended it. So I had to also move out of an old place at the same time she was in the hospital. I didn't do any of that until her parents came. Actually, well, I did start moving out before your parents came. I did it during that time as well too, because someone was covering me while I was in the hospital during the day for the few hours I took to do it. So I didn't get rest those days. It was a 24-hour, multiple 24-hour shifts for me to move out of the house. And big thanks to our friends that definitely came to pull through to give me the help I needed to get it done. And where we moved back to my mom's place, my mom's and grandma's place, because very fortunately we had room here, and I think it was the best choice from our part too. This is where we prepared. So at this home of ours, there's an apartment here that pretty much my mom used here, but she also used another part of the house, and it was something that would be more comfortable for your parents, because in the neighborhood we live in, there's a larger Chinese population and there's Chinese supermarkets. So at least that bare minimum was enough to sort of making sure that they can handle and take care of themselves. Because they come in this country not knowing English, not knowing anything.
And it's their first time coming to US.
Yeah, first time coming to US, we would think that we would take care of them. She would take care of them. But in this case, it was the other way around. So it was a very difficult thing. So it was definitely the better choice to move back home, because my mom and grandma was here. Other family members can always come and visit and give out help. Big thanks to family, big thanks to friends that helped us move out from the neighborhood we were in. But anyway, called about the pharmacy. They thought we lived in the old place still, but Had that fixed, but it was definitely a big hassle. I had to call the other pharmacy, I had to call this pharmacy, speak to them back and forth, yell, saying I need these drugs now, but we're back home, I can't do this without these drugs. And trust me, her eye, even though it was treated, like the vein, the arteries was treated, her eye was still very, very swollen. So we still had to have special ointments, we still had to apply certain pressures, eye drops, to make sure the pressure was managed. She had special eye drops too, just to relieve that pressure. So it was a very stressful thing to do, to make sure we had all these medicine, and knowing what these medicine names are, not messing up. She had 3 different drops, 2 different ointments for her eyes, 3 types of, I think 4 types of drugs, just pills and alone, and then other types of vitamins and such. It was a massive amount of scheduling around that, and the nurses at NYU and Maimonides took care of all that for us. Imagine doing one alone, especially a person that doesn't know what the hell's going on, right? She didn't know anything about drugs. Like her Shan must go back. She did not. She, even though she was awake, she remembered us here and there. I think cognitively she wasn't doing fully there. She didn't keep schedule. She just know like I need to do therapy. I need to get better. That's all you know, right? You kept the motivation up and kept that work up. Yeah. But now she's doing that herself.
Now I organize my pills for every week.
Yeah, she does everything herself.
Then check my appointments on my chart, NYU my chart, to make sure. Even one day you forgot we had therapy sessions 1 hour before our usual time.
Yeah, I was just busy at work. Yeah, exactly. So she cognitively, everything like how she is now, it's definitely a big difference compared to the first day you came back home. She was still in the wheelchair, and trust me, the wheelchair clearance was just perfect for everything we had to do. So it was definitely the more difficult thing to manage. But at the same time, when we came back here, we had to figure out how to see outpatient doctor visits, because as soon as we got discharged, we had a lot of follow-up. Dr. Hooten with Dr. Wong, Dr. Busick. Yeah, we had to see those 3 doctors primarily. Yeah, but that was the discharge. All right, we're done for now.